It's time for the Super Bowl, and Rufus Peabody joins the show this week to talk all about betting props on the big game.
Unabated. That's the new word, unabated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me today, skipping through our usual banter, Captain Jack, as always, is here, and Rufus Peabody joins us now because it is time for the Super Bowl. We are a little bit under 2 weeks away, and hey, it is full on Super Bowl mode. Jack, Rufus, are you guys excited for the Chiefs Eagles rematch?
I mean, I am. I'm kind of geographically an Eagles fan, so I actually most of my bets so far have been against the Eagles, but I'll kind of be rooting for them. Rufus, how about you?
I wish the Redskins had made it, but so that was disappointing. But it's I don't know. I'm not really excited or not excited. It's the matchup, and so that's what I'm having to tackle. You know,
I, I think it's going to be a good game. I'm hoping that we get an exciting one like we did with the last rematch because, yeah, I feel you. This feels like a Super Bowl where everyone's kind of, if they're not geographically or just fan inclined, everyone's kind of like, do we really have to root for one of these two teams? But that's the nice thing
that's a
about
good
sports
point.
betting. We can take all of that out and make it a financial game, right?
That's the goal.
That's pretty much sports for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's still some joy to it. Like Rufus, it was great getting to see you go and support your team and go to the game in Detroit, which was an awesome victory. My
It was a lot of
condolences that the
fun.
road ended there.
Oh, I mean, I think it was a great season they had, and so and I'll always have that memory of that special night in Detroit.
Yeah, it's the future looks pretty bright for you in Washington right now. That's for certain.
Not a lot of people can say I always have that special night in Detroit. So
True.
Very true. But we've got a matchup to get to. We've got prop lines that are already out, and we've got plenty to talk about here. Let's dive into it. And I want to start off by talking about the fact that prop lines are already out. It used to be Thursday night, Westgate's prop reveal night. That would signal the start of Super Bowl prop betting season. FanDuel and a whole bunch of other shops already had numbers up Sunday night when the games ended.
Well, Tom, actually, Westgate prop reveal night, Superbook prop reveal night actually used to be Tuesday night back when I was starting, and so they moved it back to Thursdays. But you know, by Wednesday, props historically were out, or at a lot of places, and then you'd have the laggards trickling in like Thursday, Friday. Occasionally, it would be like the Golden Nugget going on Saturday,
Mhm.
but it's always been kind of like a big sprint after the conference championship games end to try to get my numbers ready. Although for me, in recent years, I have made it less of a sprint and just kind of taken my time a little more.
Yeah, it's certainly a lot has changed, and we're going to talk a lot about that. But like you said, Westgate moved their numbers back, but now we get numbers that are already out Sunday night. Like I already bet a couple props just on the opening slate. How does it impact your strategy? I mean, for you personally here, it's kind of more of a do you even care about the opening numbers? Are you trying to grab that equity?
I mean, like, there's a few places where grabbing the opening numbers is still really valuable. Places that are sort of independent or do their own thing. I mean, Westgate will take, they'll book an opinion for sure.
Mhm.
They'll put some numbers that'll create some arbs off of sort of the DraftKings and FanDuels of the world when they open. South Point also will have some unique numbers out there, and occasionally we'll have some soft numbers to bet into at openers. But you know, if you're not there, like if you're not there right at the beginning, you're not going to get those numbers. And the soft numbers, like the gravy, everybody knows they're good, and so it's like it's not about having like a really good model. It's just about having a clue and knowing at least just from having done this for many years, like there was always competition to race to those numbers. But I think the big change is the fact that that now with FanDuel, DraftKings, et cetera, booking props basically every week, every game, books do have an idea how to price a lot of these. That whereas in the past, like 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't see props like, will there be a roughing the passer penalty called? Will there be a score? Will there be a lead change in the second half? Will the score be tied after 0-0? Right? You'd have a lot of props that these books didn't have a lot of practice pricing, and they would do it like once or twice a year. And so there were a lot more opportunities because books couldn't learn. And if you were doing that and booking bets every game, you'd quickly learn like, oh, maybe our numbers aren't right here. But also, they have content providers that are algorithmically pricing this stuff too. Like, I don't think people were using logistic regressions back in 2008 as much. So, um, so as a result of that, there just isn't. I mean, the openers just aren't what they used to be. And as you all said, now books are coming out with stuff like Sunday night, like right after the conference championship games end. So you don't have books that are putting up numbers without anything to reference. And so what ends up happening is most of our volume ends up being later on. And so there just isn't the need to rush to try to get a little bit of really good EV. I mean, if it used to be that we got down more than, I don't know, I would say probably 60% to 70% of our Super Bowl propositions that first week, just basically hitting openers. And now it's like 90% the weekend of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I was gonna ask my next question is how is your day-to-day process for these 2 weeks changed? I mean, you don't there's not nearly as much pressure on you to have numbers ready out of the gate now.
I went skiing on Monday. I didn't even start until Tuesday. So I think that answers the question right there. And like South Point came out with some stuff, I believe yesterday. That's what Chris told me. And like I literally just opened up the app recently, I mean, this afternoon and was seeing that clearly I had missed some openers there. And I'm like, is it worth it for like 5 pretty good bets to drive down there? Probably not. So my plan is to just kind of keep just working through it. I'm doing to dive deep. To dive deep into a lot of the player stuff. I mean, that's kind of the key because it is just one game, and so there are. I think with some of the advanced charting data, there's opportunities to kind of look at matchups and try to figure out how it's going to play out for like a player participation standpoint. But I'm going to have some, like I already have a baseline set of player projections, at least for the skill position players done, but that's gonna change a lot over the next week.
So Rufus, there may be people tuning into this podcast here where this is the first year they are betting Super Bowl props. They've heard about them before. This is the first year they have legal outs that they can get to bet them. And let's say you get in the elevator there in your condo in Las Vegas, and somebody gets in and says, "Hey, you're Rufus Peabody. Hey, before we get to the ground floor, what should I do about Super Bowl props?" So, could you give a 30-second summary of what a beginner would do if faced with Super Bowl props for the first time?
What a beginner should do is bet on something that they will enjoy rooting for. That's what I would say to a beginner. Because look, for most people, this is entertainment, and you want it to be fun. And watching the Super Bowl for me is generally not fun. I'm generally rooting against things happening. So I do think knowing why you're betting is important.
Okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
And that was 30 seconds, so you completed the task.
So I mean,
Um,
sorry, it's not better, but I think in general, though, if you're trying to win, I would look for things where where there might be some team specific things where a more general model could be off. I mean, a good example would be both of these teams. Well, I should say the Eagles go for it on fourth down a lot, and they also run the tush push a lot, and so that might throw off some models on fourth down stuff, on like 1 yard touchdowns, things like that. And so I mean, just look for sort of angles that you think that might not be being priced in by something that's more of an algorithm.
That's actually a bet that I wanted to ask you about because I saw it up. I believe Sammy P tweeted it out saying that the yes for will the Eagles convert a fourth down at -1,000. The no was +550.
Yes is -1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's value there.
I know. I was curious if you'd be on the
So
no
much
for
of it's
something like that.
circumstantial, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could say they're automatic on fourth and on fourth, third and fourth and one, but I think on tush push plays this year, at least the way I found out, quarterback sneaks, they're successful on 34 of 42 of them this year. So I
Jeez.
mean, it's not auto, but it's and I think at least one of them was there was a fumbled exchange, but yeah, part of it's just how often are you going to get in those fourth and one scenarios, and so part of that's random. Like, do you end up if you end up with a fourth and two, they're probably not going to do that.
There was a brief conversation with Plus EV Analytics on Twitter the other day, and he was kind of analyzing that bet. And I said, the thing about the Eagles, they have cluster injuries to the center, and that's something that can't really be ignored. We don't know the extent of those injuries. It's the starting center and the backup center, and we don't know the extent of that until we get closer to the game. So this is one where I would say I don't think there's value to the no because plus 550 doesn't seem enough, in my opinion.
I would probably
But
take plus 550 on the no. That's just me, but
yeah,
again, I don't have a number for that yet. But I think I saw at South Point the yes on Eagles converting a fourth down was minus 300 or minus 360, something like that. It
no,
wasn't.
there you go. There's an
Yeah.
arb out there for
Yeah,
the
I mean,
world.
there are going to be arbs out there.
Hmm.
That's kind of what a lot of people are doing in general with these openers. They're like, oh, I can get minus 360 here, plus 500 here. I'll just take that. But
Yeah.
again, you're not going to be able to get, on Super Bowl Sunday, we'll be able to bet 10,000 on a prop at circa, whereas like we might be getting 1,000 or 2,000 at most on these openers and finding a few really good ones is nice. But at the same time, if you look at how much EV it'll give me, like relative to the EV, the whole portfolio, it doesn't make up enough to really justify like all that grinding. And also, I'm the only one in Vegas right now. None of the rest of the groups out here. So I'm kind of like, you want me to do all this running around?
Are they going to come out?
We'll have some of us out here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know from knowing you for a few years now that like that last weekend, you're darting around town, you're darting down to Arizona. Um, so let's talk a little bit about the impact of the regulated market, the online market. Has that affected you in that edges disappear faster, or are you able to just leverage that, get down to Arizona, put some bets in there and make it a bigger portfolio than you would have had in years past where you were kind of stuck with Vegas and offshores?
Yeah. How does the balance of that convenience versus the fact that it's convenient for everybody else weigh out?
I mean, I think it's made markets more efficient for sure, just because you're competing against a lot more people. And as I said, you have these books that are pricing out every week. I do think it's interesting that the regulated U.S. books don't tend to move off of that on action quite as much, to the same extent that if I bet something at Circa or Westgate, or I'm going to see a pretty damn big move. Who is it that told me once that Westgate, if I would bet something, they'd move it like 60 cents on me at times. And then once I left, they'd move it back a little bit. Someone would, they said they checked and made sure Rufus made it to the parking lot. Okay, we'll move it back a little bit. Because they just didn't want me to rebet it. But especially if I was betting an under, because they know that they're going to be getting more overaction. So I think that you can sort of get down more with the regulated books, I think. But you don't have the same movement towards overs and towards like yes props that you generally did before PASPA was repealed. And I mean, you still do see some of it, but I mean, part of it is like there are no bets on like touchdowns outside of Nevada. Really, you can't bet the no Kelsey touchdown or no Barkley touchdown, which you can bet in Nevada. And in fact, in Nevada, if they're offering the yes, they have to offer the no on those anytime touchdown markets. Last year was a bit of a learning experience. I think we were wrong or I was wrong, I think, on my thesis that because the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas, and it was the epicenter for betting as well, and you had, huge crowds coming into the city. I thought that there would be some really good opportunities close to game time, betting on unders, betting on the no touchdowns, those things. And the markets didn't really, with a few exceptions, the markets didn't really move up as like those numbers didn't increase as much as I had hoped. Like the Kelsey receiving yards kind of basically stayed steady. And I think also part of part of the difficulty is deciding when to pull the trigger on some of these props. Like, do you bet it Saturday night? It's moved up a little bit. Do you bet it Sunday morning? Like, I mean, some of these you're having to bet at brick and mortars. You're gonna have to wait in line. So it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna wait till right before the game starts. It's like, no, you're getting in line and you're betting. You're gonna just, I mean, because you got to get that money in. But there are. It's always great if you could wait till the perfect time and bet an under after the numbers moved up like 8 yards or something like that. But I think this year we might be trying to bet more throughout the week and in a way to like allow the market to bounce back just to be able to get down bigger positions. Like let's say we liked Barkley, or I don't know. Actually, I don't even think we like Barkley under, but if we did, we might bet under 114 and a half, and then it'll get bet back up, and then we can bet it under and it'll get bet back up. Whereas if we're just trying to get that whole position down on game day, we're betting it and there's not really a chance for the market to bounce back quite as much. So I do think it's one area where just because I put information into the market by betting something, it doesn't mean the price is going to like stay there, especially with sort of player prop stuff. I mean, I think that might be for some game props that are mispriced, I think it's a different story.
When you mentioned the your thesis last year on perhaps it being in Las Vegas would lead to some inflation in those markets, total tangent. I'm curious if maybe people got off the plane, got here, said, "Oh, I'm going to bet on the game," and then they opened up their DraftKings account and were like, "Why can't I bet here?" And then they tried to open up an MGM account and were like, "Why do I have to go into a casino in order to?"
Who knows?
I
I mean,
think
I just thought that there would be a lot. I thought at the MGM books, especially not the Bet MGM, but the MGM retail, that you would see more movement towards overs.
Mhm.
And you saw a little bit, but numbers kind of held steady. And I think maybe books are more willing to just take some risk on either that, or there just wasn't as much action on the S's and overs as I had anticipated.
But you would think that there would be, just because, I mean, we have more recreational money than ever before coming in on this game. But like you said, the books just aren't moving on action.
I mean, I think they are moving on action to some extent, but maybe they're anchoring. I think I think FanDuel more than other books is probably willing to just take a position,
Yeah.
and trust their own analytics. And so I think part of it is also just the fact that maybe books aren't wanting to create arbs with other books, whereas in the past, like you would see that a little bit. Like a few years ago, you would see you might be able to get under 88 and a half in Vegas, whereas it's like 83 and a half at FanDuel or DraftKings. And
Okay.
again, I think a lot of these, I mean, this is Sunday, day of the game, close to game time. It's to be able to get that under 88, 88 and a half. It's not like you can just do it from a mobile. Well, you could do it from a mobile account, but you'd only be getting smaller limits than at the retail. Like a lot of these books in Vegas will give you smaller limits on their mobile app. So it's practically hard, and you practically can't take the other side of that either if you're in Vegas. I mean, you have to have someone outside of Nevada betting at the other books. But Tom, I don't know. I don't know. I can't tell you exactly why this happens once a year. I don't really pay attention to props much outside of that.
Hmm.
Okay, let's talk about the actual game because I think there's probably a lot of people listening going, we're gonna talk about this game.
Yeah.
Okay, so these two teams, it's a rematch from 2 years ago. How much does that rematch play into your priors for this event? How much does that like
Not at
the
all.
Super Bowl 2 years ago?
No, not at all. But I do think we do. It does give us more data on how the Chiefs play in Super Bowls. Although
Getting a lot of that
it was,
lately.
well, we had the same thing with the Patriots being in like every other Super Bowl for like 20 years. It felt like so. it's some teams like with things like over under 2.5 players to attempt a pass or players to complete a pass. A lot of that is figuring out. I mean, I guess is it going to be a blowout when you have a backup quarterback coming in late, but more will there be some sort of trick play? And we do have a little bit more of a sample about how these coaches and teams sort of approach the Super Bowl. So that is data. But aside from that, like not much really. It's I don't think the market anchors too much to what happened in previous years. I think in general the prop market anchors a lot to what happened in recent weeks. Like Kelsey had what, like 10 or 15 receiving yards last week?
Yeah.
Like nothing. And I think his prop number was maybe 60, was around 65 and a half in the 60s last weekend. And I think it opened a little less than what it was, whereas like normally you'd expect that to sort of be a little bit higher. And so and kind of the same goes with guys that have had big games recently, like a Dallas Goedert. You see his prop number has gone up like 10 receiving yards from last week. And, he also, I mean, he missed a lot of time due to injury. He missed, I think, from week 13 on. He came back in the playoffs, or I think he might have been back he was back last game of the regular season, or the last game that they played with their starters, week 17. But so there was a little more, I think, a bigger adjustment makes a little bit more sense in that case. But at the same time, I do think you do see a lot of overreaction to recency in terms of some of the player participation stuff. And I think the key's breaking down like which part of that recency, like, is this a pattern? Is this actually this guy's getting more usage, or is this just like the ball was thrown his way rather than thrown someone else's way?
So, in years past, there's always that one player that everyone kind of keys on and said, "Oh, this guy is going to have a monster game." I remember a few years back, Cooper Kupp was the hot play. Obviously, the past two or three Super Bowls here, it's been centered around like Travis Kelce. This
Christian
year, it's
McCaffrey.
Saquon Barkley. And
Saquon.
you mentioned earlier that you don't think you'll be on Saquon unders. Tell us what your approach is to Saquon Barkley on this game.
I mean, if I bet unders, I'm going to be waiting probably, but it's interesting that his rush yards number last week was in the 120s, and we're only seeing it like around 115
It hit
on
131
average.
last week.
Yeah. And he had a 100-yard game, didn't he?
Yeah,
Um,
He had
about 118.
mhm.
he didn't have a ton of rushes, just how the
he,
game went.
he ripped
But
that 60-yard carry at the very start of the game, but then he didn't play the fourth quarter.
yeah. And so to me, it's interesting that number. Like, I thought in previous years, if this was just in Vegas without pre-pass, but that would have opened in the 120s for sure. So, I think if you want to bet a Saquon over, bet it now.
Yeah.
I think that has to go up, right? I mean, he's been dealing with the hamstring for a while, right? I think the 2 weeks, like, I mean, I could see an argument for like, I think there is an argument for the fact for him having kind of been playing hurt recently, and maybe 2 weeks off will help him out. But I mean, I can't imagine I'll be on overs on Saquon at game time, but if I am on overs, it'll be early.
I think
And I
it's
think that's generally the right approach. If you want to bet overs, bet them early. If you want to bet unders, wait.
Yeah, I mean that's always the rule of thumb. I mean, I know all season long doing the prop show with Derek Carty, every week it would show his numbers would show an edge in the unabated prop simulator on the Saquon under, and every week we would say, just don't do it. Like the man's playing at an insane clip this season, and we keep expecting him to regress to the mean, but sometimes you just have that amazing season, and it's better to not lose money to it every week.
If only you knew what would happen ahead of time, right?
Amen to that. Now, Rufus, another question there. Saquon, obviously one of the big guys to focus on last year, McCaffrey and Kelsey. But when it comes to, I guess, you would say the trends maybe of these teams and just teams overall, do you find more often you're finding value on betting role players to have more participation in these games, or are you betting more on superstars? Do teams tend to open the playbook more and get more guys involved, or do they winnow things down and say we're going with our best guys?
I think one thing you need to be, that's a good question. I think it's probably going to, I don't know the answer to that, Tom, to be honest. I think it probably varies a little from team to team. Although I do think there's certain cases where guys get load management and, they're going to be, they're going to get, you expect them to be like a full go for the Super Bowl. But I mean, a good example might be like Saquon last week. He missed like six straight snaps to start. Actually, it was I think he played two snaps. It was their third drive. Like you had Gainwell getting a bunch of action there, and I think he might have just been like slightly banged up, right? And whereas normally I was expecting, okay, NFC Championship game, we're going to see Barkley basically out on the field all the time. And so there's always these things that you don't know, right? I mean, a guy takes a little bit of a hit. I think it might have been Barkley pass blocking and getting like nailed, and just needing a breather for a few plays. So there's a lot that you can't really predict, or that that is very difficult to predict for sure. But I do think that teams aren't going to be leaving any bullets in the holster, and I think that's why we see Mahomes running the ball a lot more in the playoffs and the Super Bowl historically than he has in the regular season.
Hmm.
There's really nothing to save yourself for. So I think that is worth noting. And so, and I also think if you just go off of like just overall numbers for the season, look at what role players might be doing in garbage time, and so you have to realize that probably they won't be getting, unless the game is completely out of hand, they probably won't be seeing the action that they maybe would have in like a week 11 game if they're up three touchdowns or down three touchdowns.
Do you do you find yourself usually is your team usually ending up on a lot of props focused around the big guys, or is it that you do find some of that value on some of the guys further down the
It's
depth chart?
both. It's both. I mean, I think as you know, if you've used the Unabated prop simulator, the difference between the mean and the median
Hmm.
is going to be further apart, relatively speaking, for lower totaled rushing yards, receiving yards props. So that generally points towards unders more for role players, but at the same time, role players can benefit from other players getting hurt. Like if you bet Saquon Barkley under, if he gets hurt, like an injury is only going to hurt his projection. It's not like someone else getting hurt would mean Saquon is going to get more carries. I guess you could make an argument that if like, I don't know, Jalen Hurts got hurt, then maybe they just lean on Saquon more and he gets a larger share of the rushes. But generally speaking, like same thing with like maybe an AJ Brown or Devontae Smith or like any of these sort of starters. Whereas like a third wide receiver type, like think about like a Jahan Dotson. If Devontae Smith or AJ Brown got knocked out of the game with an injury, Jahan Dotson suddenly is his projection changes a ton, right? So like clearly Jahan Dotson could get hurt and that would hurt his projection, but I think he is more likely to gain from injury to someone else than he is to get hurt to have his projection hurt by an injury to himself. So I think it's not always. I think the asymmetry of how injuries can help or hurt a player is something to think about there.
Also important to think about. I mean, he has less of a chance to get hurt. AJ Brown is going to be out there every single play.
Well,
Dotson's
Jahan
wide receiver
Dotson
three.
actually has a pretty. I mean, it's kind of crazy how few targets he gets. I think he hasn't had a target in the last 2 weeks, and he's run 40 routes.
Wow.
40 routes, no target.
Wow. So Rufus, we paid some money to Pat Riley, so we have to ask you this question. Can Casey three-peat? And what does a three-peat mean to the future of NFL betting? Is it good to have this evil empire that everyone's rooting against just because they're so successful?
I don't know. I think you always need a
Yeah.
villain, or I mean, a superstar
Yeah.
team. I mean, I think dynasties are make people engaged. People either root for the team or root against the team. I mean, think about the Patriots, think about Tiger Woods. I think it drives engagement. I think overall it's probably good for the NFL. I don't, but not my area of expertise.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it's good for the NFL when you have the combination of the fact that you have the best team that consistently is winning like this, and then they got lucky that the biggest pop star on the planet is dating one of the players and wants to go to every game. Like, if you're Roger Goodell, you're sitting there like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Um, I find it interesting how in team sports, you always, and this is going completely outside of betting, but in team sports, we hate the dynasties. Everybody wanted to hate the Warriors. Everybody wanted to hate the Patriots, the Chiefs. And then you bring up Tiger Woods. Who doesn't
Individual
root for Tiger
sports.
Woods?
I know where you're going. It's completely different with individual sports.
Yeah.
Federer, you know, like Djokovic, right? I mean, tennis, like Nadal, like, I mean, you have the big three there, but I think we love someone kind of dominating.
The
And I think it's
individual
because
greatness.
it takes time with individuals. With team sports, you have allegiance to a team, regardless of who the players are. I think with individual sports, it takes time to get to know players, and so if the players that are on top are constantly changing, there isn't really time to develop like a loyalty to a particular player. And so I think that would be my guess why. By the way, it's when we started this podcast, it was like light outside, and I
Yeah.
didn't have lights on in my background, and now it's gotten dark, and so I feel like the background is it looks
You're
like I'm
good.
in a very dark room.
Yeah.
You're
The
good.
sun
You're
sets
good.
quickly here in Vegas for sure. Um, one more thing on that. I am very curious, like the absolute fervor about the officiating for Chiefs games the last couple of weeks. It's gotten so insane.
I'll
Um,
be honest, I didn't watch the divisional round game, and I missed the second half. I had a dinner, so I missed the second half of the Chiefs Bills game. So I kind of missed all that fervor. So I can't actually say, well, I don't have any thoughts on it.
I
But
just think I'm curious to see if like something does change because these referees are still people and they see all this stuff out there, but I don't think that there's going to be any directive from the league about it. And I also quite frankly think that we have gone way over jumping the shark. Like people are making a lot about the Josh Allen fourth down stop. I feel like that was a 50-50 call. Like they, and it felt like every play if there was a flag that was not that was in favor of the Chiefs, they were like, it's rigged. It's
look,
getting
I
insane.
look. There's certain quarterbacks that are going to get roughing the passer penalties thrown
Hmm.
against them more, and generally, it's the less mobile quarterbacks, the guys that are more fragile,
Yeah.
like the Brady's of the world. Whereas the running quarterbacks, like Cam Newton, like never had a roughing the passer penalty called against him, or so it was so rare because he was like a big dude. It just didn't look like he was ever.
Yeah.
It didn't look like an unfair hit ever. And so
Right.
I do think that I do think there probably is a little bit of bias in general for roughing the passer type stuff. But the other stuff, I don't know.
It,
I tend to, I don't think I don't think that there's the script that they're following or anything
yeah.
like that. I'm not man of the library.
It, if you were to come out on this pod and say the NFL was rigged, I think that that would be the biggest thing to happen to gambling Twitter for the rest of the year
I'd be like,
already.
it's rigged. And they leaked me the script. It's been really useful.
Yep.
Okay,
It's
Rufus, you've been doing this for a long time. When when does Super Bowl prop betting in Vegas? Do you see this ever ending for you? Or are you going to be an old man still shuffling out to Vegas to bet these Super Bowl props every year?
You told me last week
I
that
was
you're
thinking
finding
about
yourself
this.
enjoying it.
Like I was thinking about this um, earlier this month, where I had a discussion with the team about whether what we wanted to do for Super Bowl, and it doesn't make that much financial sense to put in the amount of like time I do into projections and all the time it takes betting relative to sort of the other stuff we're betting. But there is something about it that it's just like it's part of the rhythm of the seasons. It's like if you didn't have Christmas one year, or didn't have Halloween, right? It's just kind of part of the year. And there's it's I'm out in Vegas in the winter for this. Then I take a trip after the Super Bowl every year. It's just kind of, I don't know. There is something kind of comforting about it in some way.
You and I talked about that off air a little bit, and I liked what you said about it with that of like it's nice when you can still enjoy something like this, especially when your entire life revolves around grinding the EV and doing this all the time, it's nice to be able to take that time and enjoy it and have it not feel like a job, right?
I mean, it still feels like a job, but it's also something that you're right. Like there is some enjoyment from
Hmm.
it. And I think the other part of it is that we get all the old group is out here together. And so it's in kind of coming back together with those guys for a week is just a lot of fun and watching the game with like Zach and Train and I don't know if Mad Dog will be here or not, but it's really nice. It's like old times.
Yeah. All right. One last question. Over under 2.5 players to throw a pass. We didn't ask it. We got to ask that one. Are you in or out?
I hate that. Like, I mean, obviously it depends on the price. Like, that's one we always used to bet the under on all the time, and like, it's one where I remember betting under 2.5 at like -110 at one point for one Super Bowl, right? Whereas there's years when it's like -250. So honestly, I mean, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I,
This feels like a year where it might be a little bit back in favor of the under because of the fact that I can't really think of who on the rosters has thrown a pass other than the quarterbacks. And
I mean,
obviously there's the
okay,
injury
you could have
potential.
a fake punt. You could
Mm,
have any sort of wide receiver thing. Look, this is the game where you empty your playbook. If you have things that you've been saving, like you use them. And
yeah,
you could make an argument that both of these teams are teams, especially the Chiefs, knew that they would. I mean, the Chiefs lost one game, right? Or is it two? I don't
I think
remember.
too.
Well, I don't really count the last week anyway.
Football football experts on the show here.
But my point though is that the Chiefs have probably been thinking about what they're putting on film and saving things. Whereas, I mean, they haven't needed to absolutely show out everything to get here. So I'm sure that there'll be some wrinkles they have, and if they see something on film, maybe they exploit it.
You also have to factor in the narrative. You know who the Chiefs' backup quarterback is?
I don't. Does it
Carson
matter?
Wentz.
Yeah. What was it that was it Tom Moore who asked why they didn't give the backup quarterback more reps in practice? He said if 18 goes down, that
Yeah.
was Peyton Manning. He's like, we're fucked. We don't
Yep.
practice fucked.
Could you imagine, Jack? Could you imagine the state of Philadelphia as a whole? Philadelphia Monday morning sports talk radio if Carson Wentz has to come into that game and win it.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be good. They'd have to close the bridges down.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it is about that time for us. Rufus, thank you so much for joining us. I am very excited to get going on another exciting Super Bowl, hopefully, and close the chapter on another great NFL season here. And also be sure to pop into the Unabated Discord because Rufus, you're going to be in there answering
That's
questions for
me.
people. We're doing an AMA. If you're listening to this on Thursday, it is today, Thursday the 30th at Jack 3 p.m.
3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific.
It has been an absolute pleasure as always. We'll be back next week. We're going to have some exciting guests coming on. I'm going to be doing multiple guests on the pod next week, getting multiple perspectives, talking a little bit behind the counter and in front of it. Very excited for that show. We'll be talking plenty more. And of course, Jack, you're going to have the super stream Saturday night, right before Super Bowl Eve. We'll talk
Yeah.
plenty more about that next week. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. And as always, let's cash some tickets. We'll see you next episode.